Any of you who believed your voice could make a difference, I want to reaffirm your belief. You made this happen.
That was President Obama giving a shout out today to people who wrote or called or emailed or tweeted their member of Congress about a big piece of legislation that he just signed, the transportation bill. He brought two main groups of people with him other than elected officials for the signing. He brought college students, because it was this transportation bill that included the language about the student loans, keeping people's student loan rates from doubling this week. The other group of people he brought with him, besides elected officials and college students, were construction workers. Because this is the transportation bill, so it involves funding for lots and lots of construction projects, rebuilding roads and bridges and highways all across the country. And you know what this is that you're looking at right here with the president putting pen to paper here? You want to know what this is? This is kind of a miracle. Because in order to get to the point where President Obama could sign this thing and have this photo op today, the United States Congress had to pass something. This Congress. And not just a resolution about hating bad things and loving good things like they usually do, and not just some other new anti-abortion thing they've come up with, but big actual policy for the whole country. Of course, don't get too excited about the miraculous return of the spirit of constructive bipartisanship on Capitol Hill. In order to get to this point today, the president did have to sign a 1 week long transportation and student loan bill last week, because the big miracle bill had not yet made its way to his desk, and the deadlines had hit. Student loan rates were going to go up. Construction workers on highway projects were going to be laid off until they could get this done. So they had a sort of week-long bobbling of the issue, unable to get their act together. But they did get their act together. Big picture here, the bill got signed, and the whole country, left, right, and center, frankly, is livid about the fact that our power goes off indefinitely, sometimes for weeks at a time, because there was a thunderstorm somewhere. Because thunderstorms are apparently something we've never, ever thought about having before. Every summer when it happens, it's a complete shock. And then in the winter, we're equally unprepared for the cold kinds of storms. Infrastructure is something that people care about, right? On both sides of the aisle. If you look at the policy statements of both candidates running for president right now, they both at least say they want infrastructure investment. President Obama is proposing it. Mitt Romney is saying that he likes it in theory. In practice, he has been deriding it as wasteful stimulus that does not work. But Congress did pass this bill that has some good infrastructure investment in it in this transportation thing today. And if you turn that frown upside down and you try to look at the possibility of actually doing something here, you look at the country's needs, both in terms of the keeping the lights on and in terms of the economy and putting people to work, don't we, in fact, have a way forward on this one issue? Couldn't more infrastructure stuff get done? Even now, even with people calling it names, even this year, even with this Congress, even with this election. I feel hopeful about this. Christina Romer is the former chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors. She's now a professor of economics at the University of California at Berkeley. Christina Romer, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's nice to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
You are an expert on the economic side of this, about what types of policies the government can pursue to try to right the economy when it's in a bad way and to try to get maximize employment to the extent that we can. How important is infrastructure investment in the universe of different spending policies and fiscal policies that the government can adopt?
Oh, it's incredibly important. I think if you were to say what's the one small silver lining to this horrible recession that we've been through is that it has at least generated a lot of new research on what can fiscal policy do, what can government spending do. And the overwhelming conclusion of all that research is that government spending absolutely can help you recover from a recession. And among the kinds of government spending that's the most useful, it's infrastructure, where I think it's important to define infrastructure pretty broadly. So, of course, it's roads and bridges, and it is absolutely power lines like you described. But I'd also put in human infrastructure. So things like education make, human beings more productive and more efficient over time. And likewise, money spent for research and development and basic science. Those are things that both put people to work right now and make us more productive over time. And it's incredibly valuable and incredibly useful.
I feel like what we're up against here with this infrastructure discussion is sort of we're stuck between two prongs that are going in the same direction, but they feel like they're competing. And one of them is that everybody talks about the need to improve our infrastructure. Everybody talks about how that is something that's good for the country economically, that's something that is good for the country in terms of what that infrastructure, the needs that infrastructure serves in an immediate way. But the kind of things that you just described On the right, those get derided not as investment, not as infrastructure, fixing the infrastructure, but just as spending. How do you engage with that qualitative argument on the right that spending itself is so toxic that even when it's spending on stuff that we like, now's not the time to do it?
I'm a great believer in evidence-based policymaking, and I have to believe that if you keep showing Republicans the studies, the evidence that say, the returns to government spending to basic science are so enormous in terms of what they do for patents down the road, for what they do for our productivity down the road, that eventually you have to break through. And I think, that's the only way I know to do it, is to just keep showing them the evidence, trying to build the case. And you made the important point, the average person in the street understands this. They see what their school means for their kids. They see what those power lines mean for their own lives. Businesses understand it. They're the ones screaming for better ports and better roads and bridges that aren't falling down. There ought to be, as you've described, a way to have a national consensus on this issue. The other thing to point out is this is a uniquely good time to be doing this, right? So borrowing costs are at historic lows, so the government can borrow to do these things. And we have so many unemployed construction workers and electrical workers and all of those things. It's an excellent time to be doing this. It's a win-win. It's good for the economy now and jobs. It's good for the economy in the future because we're more productive.
In terms of the overall jobs picture, today's jobs report showed the economy adding just 80,000 jobs last month, the unemployment rate remaining stuck at 8.2%. As a former top advisor to the president who's now back in the academic world, what's your case to the administration, given this election year, about what can be done now to create jobs, to do the kinds of things that you're talking about, maybe even without having to go to Congress?
That is what is so hard, right? Because the kinds of things we're talking about, so infrastructure spending or, even tax changes like giving small businesses a tax cut if they actually hire people, those things require government, require Congress's approval. So what the president can do on those lines is very limited. He has been trying lots of things. So, things like our trade policy, the president does have a lot of leeway there, and he has worked very hard to say, well, if we don't have demand for American products here in America, let's try to get some foreign demand. That will at least put, if we export more, that'll put more of our workers back to work. And the president has pushed very hard. We saw just today he was bringing in another enforcement action against China to try to open up that market for American firms. So that's certainly important. The main entity here that could do something without Congress is the Federal Reserve, and that's obviously something the president can't control. But gosh, I wish they'd do something, because they are the one agency that maybe could help to move the dial without Congress doing anything. And I am so frustrated that they're sitting on the sidelines.
I don't think they watch, but if I run into them, I will pass on your frustration. You never know.
Feel free.
You never know. Christina Romer, former chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, now a Berkeley economics professor. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It's really nice for us to have you here.
Thank you.
All right. Hands down, the most gobsmacking story about traditions, sports, and trees that you will ever hear, ever. It's our close of the show tonight. Please stay tuned for it. We're very happy with it.